Chapter 1. What is a bad day? For some, a bad day is when you have a fight with your boss. For others, it's when you break up with a loved one. For some, it's when a family member dies. For me, it was the day I saw him for the first time. That day remains in my memory like a terrible nightmare. How I wish it had only been a dream. But I was born into an ordinary American family in the mid-1980s. We lived in a small town, just like everyone else. My family consisted of 3 people: my mother, my father, and me. Although it's hard to call our coexistence a family. My mother was a nurse, and my father often changed jobs because he was frequently hitting the bottle. By the time I was 5, I understood that when Dad came home after 10 p.m., we wouldn't be sleeping because he wouldn't calm down until he had beaten the stupidity out of my mother and me. Our apartment had 2 rooms and a kitchen, and even a bathroom and a toilet. It was on the first floor of a 2-story house. The house was surrounded by flower beds with huge yellow flowers. To this day, I don't know what they were called, and I've never seen them anywhere else. The town was small and destitute. In the mid-90s, when life was unbearably hungry and beatings from my father were an almost daily occurrence, a terrible thing happened to my neighbors. At the time, I was 10 years old. I was friends with my neighbor's son. His name was Sasha. He was only 8. We were brought together not only by being neighbors and having common interests, but also by a common sorrow, our parents' drunkenness. Only my father drank. For him, both of his parents drank. He often stayed the night at my place because he was afraid to go home. And he had reasons to be. Sasha was very thin, like a grasshopper. His knees and the bones on his shoulders stuck out. His head seemed big compared to his body, and it was always messy and dirty. He had light hair and green eyes. He didn't stand out from the crowd of other boys, but his hunted look and the bruises showed that he was in trouble. He was in trouble every day. On one such day, I woke up in the morning. Summer vacation had just started. My room was always dark, as the bushes with the huge yellow flowers completely covered the window. I slept in the same bed as my mom because we would lock ourselves in the room to hide from my father. But he still managed to push the door open. That night we were lucky. He didn't have the strength, and he went to sleep on the sofa. That sofa was disgusting. No one but my father would sit on it, let alone sleep on it, because when he was passed out, my father often urinated on himself. The morning was overcast and rainy. The room was dark and cool. My mother had already left for work. She always left quietly without waking me up, not so I could get more sleep, but just because she couldn't be bothered with me. As usual, I sat up in bed. My eyes fell on the dark red wooden floorboards. There were cracks between them, and in those cracks, ants crawled and a lot of dust was visible. No one at my house paid much attention to cleanliness. Next to my bed was a nightstand, and on it was an old radio. It was the only thing besides books that brought me joy in that apartment. I had few books and often went to the library, which was old and very poor. The television was for my father to turn on and watch only. I got up from the bed and went to the kitchen. The rooms were connected, so I had to walk through the room where my father was sleeping. I slipped into the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and found some raspberry jam, which I started eating for breakfast. As soon as I licked the first spoon, I heard my friend Sasha's screams. Sasha and his parents lived behind the wall. "No, I won't anymore," Sasha screamed in a broken child's voice. I flinched, dropped the spoon on the table, smearing the old, torn oilcloth. I ran out into the hallway. I ran up to the door, and from behind it, I heard muffled blows and Sasha's sobs. I started banging on the door. "Open up!" I shouted. It went quiet. The door opened, and Sasha appeared. He was pale with red eyes. A huge bruise was on half of his face. "Let's go," he rasped. "Does it hurt? Where does it hurt?" I asked, taking him by the shoulder. "It hurts everywhere. I'm thirsty. Come to my place. Dad's asleep and Mom's at work. I'll make you something to eat," I offered. We went back to my apartment. He silently wiped away his tears and snot. Sasha was very short and thin. At that moment, he seemed to be blue. I decided to make an omelet. We had eggs and milk. His grandmother had given them to her son, my father. I fried an omelet. Sasha poked it with a fork and ate only a little. "Thanks, I'm full." He took a deep breath and got up from the chair. He was wearing sweatpants with stretched out knees and a hole in the thigh. He wasn't wearing a shirt. "Can I lie down and rest at your place?" Sasha asked. "Of course, lie on my bed," I said. He fell asleep almost immediately, and while he was sleeping, I decided to go to the store to buy some cigarettes. I had already started smoking and bought them one at a time. I really liked the brand called St. George. When I went outside, it was a light rain. My flip-flops didn't protect me from the cold rainwater. My toes were already covered in dirty streaks. I had to walk and sink into the mud because the paved road in the town was practically non-existent. Chapter 2. I walked, holding my hands in the pockets of my sweatpants. Both pockets had holes, and I held soft, crumpled bills in my fists. The amount was only enough for 3 cigarettes. Whenever I heard the song about a pack of cigarettes, I'd think, "What a lucky person to have a whole pack of those." The raindrops were cold and light. The wind blew through my gray checkered flannel shirt, which was missing half of its buttons. I sped up and almost ran to the store. It was a small house, a little bigger than a kiosk, with peeling walls of an undefined light color and a heavy wooden door that one of my classmates had cut his finger on, not the whole thing, just the top joint of his thumb. Entering the store, I saw the usual customers, who looked very much like my father. There was a line of them. They were all slightly swaying and trembling. The saleswoman, Aunt Tanya, didn't hide her disdain for her customers. She was a full and almost always sweaty woman, a bleached blonde with a bun of straw on her head that had once been hair. She had bright blue eyes, not the irises of her eyes, but circles smeared around her eyelids. It was difficult to say how old she was. "What'll it be, a little shot?" she asked, knocking on the glass display case with her thick fingers. Everyone nodded their heads and held out their hands, with money clenched between their fingers. I noticed that they all had very prominent veins on their hands and bruised elbows. They must have fallen often. When they finally left the store, I could look around. The selection in the store was poor. Basically, just like the customer's needs. Looking down at the display case, I saw a chocolate bar. There were coconuts on its wrapper. I couldn't remember the name, and I didn't know how to read in Latin script. Besides, I had less money than the cost of the chocolate bar. Looking up, I met Aunt Tanya's eyes. She was smirking. Her look was full of mockery. "What do you want, young man?" she said, snorting. "3 St. George cigarettes," I mumbled. "Oh!" She sighed heavily and, moving her immense hips back a little, leaned under the counter, took out an already open pack, and pulled out 3 cigarettes. I put the money on the display case and grabbed the cigarettes. Ugh! I went outside. I couldn't stand that store, but it was the only place that sold what I needed. I stood by the entrance to the store for a moment and decided to light a cigarette. I had a beautiful lighter with a dragon on it, and I took good care of it. It was gold, and the dragon was Chinese, and its eyes were like red stones. A man had given me this lighter for washing his car's windshield. This was a business my friends and I had. We would grab buckets and rags and run to the gas station and offer to wash the car windows for those who were filling up or just driving in. We divided the money we earned equally. I lit up. The smoke quickly enveloped my throat, and I felt a pleasant bitterness. It calmed me down. Around the store were old 5-story buildings with peeling balconies and benches packed with old ladies. I was uncomfortable walking past those courtyards, especially since I might run into the locals. They didn't like it when people came into their neighborhood, and they would usually explain with their feet in a large crowd that you couldn't walk here. I decided to take the long way home. It went past my school. To be honest, I liked to study. I felt safe at school, and they fed us there. I decided to offer one of the 3 cigarettes to Sasha. I put it in the breast pocket of my shirt. As I walked past the school fence, I saw a different world. At the school, mothers walked around with strollers and toddlers who were already walking. I walked past and saw how much those children were loved. I used to be able to tear up standing behind the fence, where the metal mesh of the school fence painfully dug into my fingers when I squeezed it and looked at a laughing toddler who was running away from his mom, and she pretended that she couldn't catch him. I often asked myself, why don't I have that? And now I could see my house. Then it suddenly started to pour heavily. I ran, afraid that my cigarettes would get wet. I ran into the entrance and ran into Sasha's mother. She was drunk. Swaying, she ran into my shoulder and almost fell to the floor. I caught her and helped her stand up. She continued on her way, wearing an orange robe with a zipper in the front, like a sack with pockets. She had a crab claw hair clip. It was always in her hair. It felt like that hair clip had grown into her head. When I got to the door of my apartment, I noticed that the door was ajar, although I distinctly remembered locking it. I slowly pushed the door open and saw part of the kitchen, where my father was sitting at the table. He was gloomy and tense. "Igor!" my father yelled. I quickly took off my flip-flops and ran to the kitchen. I knew that if he had to call for a long time, he would get angry. "Where's your mother?" he asked. "At work. It's 1 in the afternoon. She'll be back soon." I tried to calm him down. "Where's the money?" he hissed. "I don't know." I cringed, knowing that he would probably hit me now. And he did. He hit me on the head, on the back of the head, then pushed me away and walked heavily to the front door, put on his flip-flops, and left. I rubbed the back of my head. It hurt a little, but it was bearable. I ran into the room to check on Sasha. My eyes didn't immediately adjust to the darkness in the room, but I could make out the light sheet, and there was no one on it. "Sasha!" I called him, but no one answered. I decided he was in the bathroom. When I went to the bathroom door, I saw that it was wide open. I went through the whole apartment, but I couldn't find Sasha. I was very surprised. Where could he have gone? Home. I decided to check. I ran barefoot to the neighbor's house, knocked, but no one was home. A feeling of anxiety washed over me. I was confused and started to quickly go over in my head where Sasha could have gone. But he was without a shirt, wearing only sweatpants, and I didn't remember if he was even wearing shoes. I went back to my apartment, sat down on a chair in the kitchen, and realized that besides the plate with the omelet that Sasha hadn't finished, there were no other clean dishes. Then I heard the door open. "Sasha!" I was happy, but my mother walked in. "No, it's me," she said, not looking at me. "Mom, Sasha is missing. We have to find him," I said with determination. "He'll turn up." She cut me off. I realized it was useless to talk to her. I went to look for him in our usual spots. After walking around the entire neighborhood, I asked everyone I met along the way, but no one had seen or knew where Sasha was. In despair, I went home. It was already dark and very cold. My father was home and asleep, and my mother was listening to the radio, lying on the bed. I was sitting in the kitchen, staring at a plate of pasta that my mother had made for dinner. I didn't know what to do or how I was supposed to sleep now, because Sasha was gone. I had to go to the neighbor's house one more time. Maybe he was already home. I didn't immediately decide to knock on the door of Sasha's apartment. First, I listened for sounds behind the door. It was quiet. I knocked, I heard footsteps, and Sasha's father opened the door. He was in a dirty white shirt and sweatpants. The smell of alcohol wafted from the apartment. "Is Sasha home?" My voice was quiet. "He's not here." "Did he come by during the day?" I asked with hope. "I don't know." He closed the door. I trudged home. Tears were streaming down my face. I went to my mother. She was lying in bed in a nightgown. Her long dark hair was scattered on the pillow. "Mom, Sasha still hasn't come home. What should we do?" I asked through tears. "Go to sleep. If he doesn't show up, we'll go to the police," she replied calmly. She turned off the light. I climbed over her and lay down by the wall. The prickly carpet on the wall scratched my knees. I looked at the patterns on the carpet that I could make out in the dark. I thought about Sasha. And then I heard a crunch. A distinct sound, but very unpleasant. I peered into the darkness, and a silhouette began to emerge. It was standing by the closed door near the closet in the darkest corner. I sat up on the bed and blinked a few times. It didn't help. The silhouette didn't disappear. Another crunch. It stepped toward me, but it moved unnaturally, as if it were on hinges. I made out its form. A messy, thin grasshopper. It was Sasha, but a different one. He had a pale face and large blue circles under his eyes. His right arm was bent back behind his back, right where the shoulder began. His legs were positioned strangely. They were crossed, and his head was tilted to the side. "Sasha, is that you?" I forced out in horror. "Yes, I'll live with you," he rasped. "But what about your parents?" I was surprised. "They'll understand later," he said in some kind of double voice, as if he had two, and walked into the shadows. He just disappeared into them. I couldn't move and realized that I had wet myself. Chapter 3. A sharp pain in my right side woke me up. The blow was probably from a kick. It was too painful. Opening my eyes, I saw the whitewashed ceiling. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught my mother standing by the bed. "You freak! What are you doing?" my mother screamed, trying to pull the wet sheet out from under me. Another full-force blow to the head. I felt a ringing in my ears. "Oh, you bastard!" my mother yelled. She grabbed my leg and dragged me from the bed onto the floor, pulled off the sheet, and ran with it to the kitchen. I was left lying on the floor. My side hurt, and my ears were ringing. I sat on the floor and remembered Sasha, who had been standing by the door to the room last night. Now the door was wide open, and the corner where Sasha had stood was not visible. Only nausea was welling up. I swallowed and couldn't get up. I heard my mother's fast footsteps. She flew into the room. She stopped in front of me. Her lips were clenched, and her hands were in fists. She grabbed me by the hair, and I silently stood up, and my mother pulled me to the kitchen. On the beige-yellow gas stove, which only had 2 of its 4 burners working, a large aluminum pot was sitting. My mother pushed me toward the stove. I noticed the dirty sheet in the pot. The water was already boiling. I didn't have time to react before my right arm was lowered into the boiling water up to my elbow. I shrieked and pulled it out of the pot, falling to the floor and hitting the back of my head on a heavy wooden chair. My mother squatted down next to me. "Don't wet the bed," she said, now without fury. Tears were streaming down my face from the pain. I groaned, seeing how my hand was turning red and starting to blister. My mother got up from her squat and went to the bathroom. She came back with a box with a red cross on the lid, took out some kind of powder in a packet, and sprinkled it on the burn. She bandaged it and gave me a painkiller. "I'll give you a shot in the evening," she said, as if she hadn't been the one to put my hand in the boiling water. I sat on the floor and watched her get ready for work. My hand was burning badly. As soon as she went out the door, I wanted to check if my father was asleep. The room turned out to be empty. I sighed with relief, but I was not only depressed by the pain from the burn, but also by the anxiety after last night. I tried to remember the details of what had happened, but I couldn't remember how I fell asleep, and after a little thought, I came to the conclusion that it was a nightmare caused by the stress of Sasha's disappearance. The sun tried to break through the bushes into the kitchen window. Small thin rays slid across the table, on which a carafe of water was sitting. I didn't feel hungry, but I had a strong desire to smoke. Remembering that I had set aside a cigarette for Sasha in the breast pocket of my shirt, I hurried to get it out. The shirt was hanging on the back of the chair by the bed, and as I was rummaging through the pockets of the shirt, I noticed a large yellow stain on the mattress. The room was always dark and stuffy, so I decided that I needed to take the mattress out into the yard. There was a clothesline, an outdoor table with benches, and almost no one was ever there. I didn't have to worry about someone seeing me with that shameful mattress. Throwing the shirt on and pulling on my sweatpants, I heaved the huge burden onto my back. It turned out to be heavy. I went outside, walked around the house, and dropped the mattress onto the sun-drenched table, hitting my hand with it. I howled in pain. The burn hurt a lot, and I sat down on a bench next to the table. I thought, if Sasha came outside now and saw this, what would he say? I felt ashamed. I decided to go to the neighbor's house to find out if Sasha had come back. I ran up the stairs and knocked loudly on the door. Sasha's mother opened the door almost immediately. She was probably standing at the entrance. I noticed that there were a lot of people in their apartment, and even police officers. "This is his friend," the tearful woman squealed in a high-pitched voice. I froze when 2 tall men in police uniforms came out toward me. "Hello, what's wrong with your hand?" A man with light hair on his head, and the same light hair in his nostrils, asked me. "I scalded it," I muttered, looking into his eyes. They were small, gray, and unkind. "When was the last time you saw Sasha?" "Yesterday morning. He was at my place sleeping," I replied. "Sleeping in the morning?" The cop squinted. "Yeah, he was sleeping. Then I went to the store, and he was already gone," I said. "I see," he said, and put his hands in his pockets and went deeper into the apartment. The second one smiled at me and winked. "Don't worry, we'll find your friend." The door closed. I froze and started to think. On the one hand, I felt relieved that they were looking for my friend. On the other hand, he hadn't come home. My forehead, back, and the palm of my unburned hand began to sweat. I ran outside and headed toward our friends. They were hanging out on the territory of an abandoned kindergarten, on the porch of the former indoor children's pool. As I approached the fence of the kindergarten, I decided to smoke the cigarette that was meant for Sasha. I leaned against the fence mesh. The smoke pleasantly came out of my nostrils. How I wish Sasha was smoking this cigarette. We would hide from real life in this kindergarten. We played cards here, mostly goat. Sasha was excellent at playing. He was smart beyond his years, but he was never careful. He was the one who broke the window in the kindergarten pool, and we were able to get inside. It was dark there, and it smelled bad. But it was a place that no one but me and my friends knew about. After finishing it, I dropped the cigarette and put it out with my sneakers. They were practically new and had no holes in the soles. I really loved them. When I got closer to the pool, I saw Jorah and Schnur sitting on the peeling railings. They were part of our group. Almost all of us had nicknames, except for Sasha. Everyone just called him by his name. "Garrick, hey," Jorah said loudly. "Hey, guys. Have you seen Sasha?" I asked, smiling. I was very happy to see them. "No, we haven't seen him in a while," Schnur squeaked. He had a girly voice. "I see. I'm going to go into the pool." I moved the cardboard that covered the window and put one foot on a pile of bricks that served as a step. It was very dark inside because the pool room only had small windows, and they were painted blue. In the middle of the room was the swimming pool itself. It was dry and broken. I was afraid of falling in. The lighter with the dragon on it only lit up a small area right in front of my feet. I decided to try and see in the dark without it. As soon as the walls and objects became distinguishable, I slowly started to walk toward the changing rooms. Around me, there were shards of ceramic tiles that had fallen off the walls. The doors to the changing rooms had been removed, and only darkness was yawning from the doorways. Stopping, I couldn't move. I was overwhelmed by horror. Then I felt movement. My hand was burning badly, but at that moment, I stopped feeling it, as well as my legs and my entire body. Turning my head, I swallowed, but there was no saliva in my mouth. I saw the silhouette of a little grasshopper. Sasha was standing next to one of the changing rooms. He was the same as in my dream. I heard that crunch again. Sasha closed the distance to me, but he wasn't walking. He was moving brokenly toward me. Now I knew for sure that I wasn't dreaming. He stopped far enough away, and I couldn't make out the features of his face, only his messy head tilted to the side. His right arm was also broken back, and his legs were too. Those crossed legs scared me terribly. I saw that he was barefoot. "I want you to know," Sasha mumbled. Again, I heard two voices that burst from his throat. "Sasha, let's go, I'll get help," I whispered. "No need. I'll show you now." He was right next to me in an instant and took my left hand with his left hand. He was standing so close that I could see his empty eye sockets. They were black and huge. His mouth was twisted as if it had frozen in a scream of fear and pain. I found myself in my room and couldn't see clear lines. Everything was blurred. Looking around, I saw Sasha sleeping on my bed. He was very close. I wanted to reach out to him, but at that moment, my father walked into the room. He was standing, trying to keep his balance, and looking at Sasha carefully. "Who are you?" my father roared. "I'm Igor's friend," Sasha mumbled in a half-asleep state. "Get out!" my father yelled. He ran up to the bed where Sasha was lying, picked him up in his arms like a feather. Swaying, he trudged with Sasha in his arms to the window. With one hand, he held the child, and with the other, he opened the window. He threw him out of the room like a kitten. I rushed to the window and passed right through my father. Sasha landed on both feet and started breathing fast. His chest rose high, and he dashed through the bushes. I only had time to see his bare feet and heels. Chapter 4. As soon as Sasha disappeared into the bushes, I wanted to jump out the window after him, but at that very second, I was behind him and saw him running toward the school. It was as if I was following him, but I didn't make any effort to do so. It was as if I were connected to him by an invisible thread. The light raindrops were falling on my friend's messy head. At the same time, not a single drop fell on me. I held out the palm of my unbandaged hand and looked at it. The raindrops flew through me without stopping. I didn't feel the drops, the pain from the burn, or my feet. I just looked down at my feet. The ground was just flying by beneath them. I was floating in the air. All around me were the same familiar streets, but they were as if in a fog. Sasha was running past the school, and I, as if attached to him, moved behind him. Looking toward the school, I saw the same mothers with strollers that I had seen yesterday on my way back from the store. But I couldn't hear them, and their faces were blurred and their movements were slowed down. So, Sasha was running past the school at almost the same time as me. Why hadn't I run into him? I would ask myself this question for many, many years to come. He stopped only at the corner of the school, and across the street from there was the store where Aunt Tanya worked. Behind the store was a wasteland. At that moment, I realized that Sasha was running in search of me. He was clearly standing there, wondering where to go next. "Sasha, stop! Don't go anywhere. I'll find you myself," I said loudly, but I didn't hear my voice. "Sasha!" I screamed with all my might, but no sounds came out. They faded in my throat. I reached out to grab his bare, thin shoulder, but my hand went through him, and I felt nothing. He was so close, so small and skinny. I could see his shoulder blades and vertebrae on his back. He was covered in fresh bruises, and some that were already healing. Tears burst from my eyes. "How could this happen? I tried to help you so many times. How many times did I hide you at my house? We spent so many happy days just hanging out on the streets and discussing new episodes of DuckTales, which your grandmother would let us watch on Sunday evenings," I thought. She lived near the store where I bought cigarettes. She was a wonderful old lady. She had trouble walking, but she knew how to bake pies and cheesecakes. This grandmother was always happy to see us. Her small one-bedroom apartment was poor, but clean. Every Sunday morning, I would wake up with thoughts of Sasha's grandmother. I didn't even know her name. I just called her Grandma too. For the first half of the day, I would go crazy with anticipation, waiting for Sasha to come get me so we could go to that wonderful grandmother's apartment. It was a different world. There was always care and love there. The grandmother would often kiss us on the forehead and then comb our hair with her hand. Her hands were always so warm and soft. When I hugged her, I felt a sense of calm. She smelled of baby cream and pies. Besides that, in the winter we would often go to the hill, which was near the railroad tracks, even though it was the slope of the railroad. We would grab pieces of cardboard and run through that wasteland. I remember how snowflakes would cover my eyes, and my feet would sink into the snowdrifts. But I wasn't cold, I was even hot. Sasha and I would race each other, and since I was almost half a head taller and my legs were longer, he was always behind, but he didn't fall behind. "And now you're in front, and I'm following you," I whispered. I remembered how we would run to the hill and, almost out of strength, fall into the soft, airy snow. In those moments, I was happy, and Sasha was always there in my moments of happiness. When we would slide down the hill, the wind and snow would hit our faces, and a wave of pleasure would wash over my entire body. I involuntarily smiled at the memories. The snow would get under our clothes, and it felt like there was snow even in our underwear. Then we would run to jump from the roofs of garages into the snowdrifts. They were located very close to the tracks. Standing on the edge of the roof and looking down at the pillow of snow, a pleasant sensation would start in the pit of my stomach, and I wanted to step back from the edge. But Sasha always jumped first, and I saw half his body enter the huge snowdrift. He was laughing, and without a moment of hesitation, I plunged in right after him. Next to these garages were large heating pipes, and homeless people lived next to them. We would sometimes see them. Sasha looked toward the wasteland and started walking along the path that led to the railroad. I was pulled along after him. The light rain began to get heavier, and Sasha ran toward the garages. The tall grass lashed his chest and face. He began to shiver from the cold as the wind picked up. He stopped, looking for shelter. Next to the heating pipes was a canopy made of a tarpaulin stretched over metal poles. Sasha ran under the canopy, and I stayed in the open. A downpour began, but I didn't feel a single drop. Sasha was trembling. He squatted down and hugged himself with his arms. His big eyes were looking somewhere upward. I saw his face and realized how much I had missed him. Two people walked through me. I didn't hear them or feel them. They went up to the canopy where Sasha was sitting. I got a good look at them. They were men, a little taller than me, dressed out of season. One had a dirty brown jacket, and he was wearing his hood. The other was in a knitted sweater with a large pattern and an orange vest, like road workers wear. Their faces were swollen and wrinkled. I focused my gaze and tried to get a good look at them and remember them. They were clearly homeless people, and they had built the canopy to hide from the rain and sun. The one who was in the jacket was holding an opaque black bag. They both stood under the canopy. Sasha also got up from his squat. They shook hands with each other. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but they were smiling. The homeless man took a bottle out of the bag. It was clear that it was vodka or moonshine. They held the bottle out to Sasha, and he shook his head, clearly refusing. Suddenly, the one who was wearing the orange vest grabbed Sasha by the hair and pulled his head back. Sasha's mouth opened, and with a laugh, he began to pour the liquid from the bottle down his throat. Sasha began to wave his arms and try to push them away. He managed to pull the bottle away from his mouth, but the second homeless man grabbed Sasha's right arm and twisted it behind his back. He did it so sharply and with such force that it was clear Sasha was in unbearable pain. My friend fell to his knees. The homeless man let go of his hand, and Sasha was still on his knees, and the one in the orange vest ran up to him and kicked him in the head. Sasha fell onto his side. I saw that he wasn't moving. I couldn't move either. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. A woman with messy hair was yelling something at the homeless men and waving her fist. They were responding, gesturing wildly. With a wave of her hand, she quickly walked along the line toward the city streets. I noticed that the rain had stopped. The homeless man who was in the jacket picked up Sasha and threw him over his shoulder. Sasha was hanging face down. His arm, which was clearly broken, was swinging unnaturally behind his back. The homeless men headed behind the heating pipes. I was pulled along after them. They walked unhurriedly, as if it wasn't an unconscious child hanging on his shoulder, but a bag of sugar. I was shaking. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. I so wanted them to leave him. "Let him go!" I cried out. But again, there were no sounds. They stopped. A pole was sticking out of the ground in front of them, the same kind as the ones the tarpaulin canopy was stretched over. The homeless men looked at each other, and, lifting Sasha into the air, the homeless man impaled him on this pole with a swing. They did it, surprisingly, easily. "No, Sasha!" I yelled. I thrashed in the air, trying to reach my friend's body. But nothing came of it. I kept staying in the same place. The homeless men stood and looked at their creation. Sasha had wide-open eyes and a twisted mouth. His head hung to the side, his right arm was bent back, and his legs were crossed, as if he wanted to protect himself from the pole with them. A stream of blood was flowing down the pole onto the wet ground. "Garrick, what's wrong with you?" Jorah was shaking me, and I was back in the pool room. Schnurr and Jorah were standing nearby. Their faces were clearly expressing fear. "Garrick, you were standing like that for almost an hour. We couldn't get you to snap out of it," Schnurr whimpered. "No, this can't be." I started crying, falling to the floor, and curled up into a ball. The guy sat down next to me, squatting. Jorah was stroking my head. Chapter 5. Lying on the floor of the pool, I didn't want to believe anything that Sasha had shown me. My hysterics lasted for another 10 minutes, but then I went quiet. "Garrick, what's wrong with you? Why are you crying?" Jorah asked. "Did you see something?" Schnurr said. "Yes, I saw something. I know where Sasha is." I started to get up, leaning on Jorah. "What's wrong with you? Have you lost your mind? You said you didn't know where Sasha was. Let's check it out right now. Are you coming with me?" I asked my friends with hope. "Well, let's go. Otherwise, you might freeze up somewhere again," Schnurr chuckled. Schnurr and Jorah were good kids from our neighborhood. They were in a parallel class. Jorah was tall and dark-skinned. There were always a lot of girls around him. And Schnurr was also taller than me. He was all freckles and had red hair. I knew that they would always be with me and would lend a shoulder to lean on. We had a lot of problems with other guys, and sometimes we would get beaten up and have our money taken away, but none of us ever abandoned each other in trouble. We climbed out through the pool window. "What's wrong with your hand?" Jorah asked. I just looked at him. It wasn't in our rules to ask such questions, since we all came from similar families, except for Schnurr. He lived with his grandmother. "Yeah, it's nothing." I turned away. "Got it. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to." Jorah patted me on the shoulder. We walked toward the wasteland. My hand started to ache unbearably, but I had to get to that place and see everything for myself. We walked in silence. Only once did Schnurr try to ask, but I didn't let him. I shushed him. Throughout our entire journey, I tried to prepare myself for what I was going to see. I was practically certain that Sasha was there. The noon sun was baking, and my thirst was getting stronger and stronger. When we approached the store, Jorah stopped and looked at me. He frowned and started rummaging in his shorts pockets. "Now I'll get a bell." He tossed a coin up and caught it with one hand. He ran in and just as quickly ran out of the store with a bottle of soda in his hand. He unscrewed the cap, handed me the bottle, and nodded. I started drinking greedily. "Leave some for us," Schnurr squealed. "Let him drink. We'll run to the pump," Jorah said. I felt better, and we walked along the wasteland path, the one I had just recently been floating on behind Sasha. It seemed like an ordinary day of vacation, but the feeling didn't leave me that we were about to meet Sasha and go get our homemade fishing rods and go fishing. We would fry the fish we caught right there on the fire and tell jokes and stories. How much I hoped at that moment that I was wrong and that Sasha had already been found safe and sound. And everything I had seen was just some kind of glitch in my consciousness. The heating pipes running along the garages were already visible. I stopped and couldn't even look in that direction. "Garrick, why'd you stop?" Schnurr asked in surprise. "Wait," Jorah commanded. I looked at the huge bushes that enveloped the path, the visible tarpaulin canopy, and I started to feel sick. "Is it really true?" I whispered. My friends looked at me, and I saw surprise in their eyes. They couldn't see this. "Stay here. Don't follow me," I said as firmly as I could. They took a step back from me. I made my decision. I have to. And I walked confidently toward the canopy. Everything inside me was shaking, and the nausea wouldn't go away. I stood in front of the canopy and took a deep breath. I could hear my heart beating. The beat was in my temples, too. Walking around the canopy, I saw Sasha. A picture that was forever seared into my memory. Sasha's small, thin body seemed to be standing without touching the ground. The pole pierced his little body. Sasha was illuminated by the sun, very pale, with an expression of pain on his face, exactly the same as I had seen him at night, and then in the pool. I started vomiting soda. I fell to my knees, tears streaming down my cheeks. I couldn't breathe. The guys ran up to me. "But why?" Jorah cried out. His stomach couldn't handle it either, and his breakfast ended up on my bandaged hand. "Let's run. We have to tell someone," Schnurr shrieked. We ran. I didn't see anything around me. I ran without feeling the pain from the blows of the tall grass on my face or the pain from my burned hand. Exhaustion was seizing my legs, but horror and adrenaline wouldn't let me stop. We ran to Sasha's apartment and stopped. "How are we going to tell them?" Jorah said. Schnurr knocked. We stood there. I could hear the air being sucked in through my nostrils. The door opened. Sasha's father looked at us, and he was sober. His eyes were clearly disappointed. He was waiting for his son. "We found Sasha," I said quietly. "Why didn't you bring him with you?" "Where is he?" the father asked. "He's over there, at the heating pipes. He's behind the wasteland," Jorah was able to say. "What? What?" Sasha's father yelled. We were silent. He started crying, falling to his knees and leaning against the door frame. Sasha's mother ran up and froze in the hallway. We looked at her, and I felt that I couldn't hold back my tears. I turned away. She rushed to the neighbors on the second floor. They had a phone. "Don't go anywhere, boys." Her cry reached us. We had nowhere to go. I decided that we should wait for the police at Sasha's house. We went inside, walking past his father. His shoulders were shaking. Maybe they did love Sasha after all. A thought flashed through my mind. And would mine cry for me? I thought, and my question surprised and even scared me. We went into Sasha's room. The room was tiny. There was only a bed and a writing desk in it. It was bulky and took up most of the room. The bed was unmade. I covered it with the blanket that was on the floor, and we sat on it. On the wall near the bed, there was a carpet with an image of an eagle and a deer. The window was dark because of the bushes with large flowers, and it had no curtains. A large crack across the whole pane was taped up with blue tape. On the desk was a box from Turbo chewing gum. I went up to the desk and took it. Inside, there were neatly stacked piles of candy wrappers and chewing gum stickers. I saw Love Is Turbo and even car stickers. At the bottom of the box was a Kinder Surprise hippo. I had one just like it. A philanthropist had given us Kinder eggs once at school. We waited for the police. Chapter 6. The police officers came into Sasha's room. They arrived quickly, and we barely had to wait for them. "Hello, guys. What did you find?" The police officer with a kind smile, whom I had already seen, asked. He was clearly waiting for our answers with interest. "If you're wasting our time, you'll be put on record," the second one, with hair in his nostrils, said irritably. "We found Sasha. He was killed," Jorah said in a quiet but confident voice. "He was impaled on a pole near the railroad," Schnur said, sobbing, and burst into tears. I couldn't say a word. I just silently looked down at the scratched linoleum. "How did you find him?" the police officer with the kind eyes asked. "We sometimes hang out there." "We just stumbled upon him by accident," I forced out. Jorah and Schnur looked at me carefully but said nothing. I didn't want to talk about what Sasha had shown me. The police officers left the room, and we heard that they were going to head there with a search party and dog handlers. I hoped they wouldn't take us with them. I couldn't handle seeing that sight a second time. To my relief, the police officers left the apartment. Sasha's father went with them. After sitting on the bed for a little while longer, we decided that we should go home. When we left Sasha's room, we saw his mother sitting in the kitchen. She was holding her head in her hands and wasn't paying any attention to us. We looked at each other and didn't say goodbye to her. She didn't have time for us. My friends stopped as they were walking out onto the street and looked at me. "How did you know Sasha was there?" Schnur asked quietly. I shook my head and opened the door to my apartment. My mother had already come back from work and was heating something up in the kitchen. I silently took off my shoes and saw that my favorite sneakers were all covered in mud. Immediately, the images of Sasha's murder, which now accompany me, came flooding back. "How am I supposed to forget this?" I thought. I took my sneakers and headed to the bathroom. The bathroom door was painted white with drips and opened with a creak. My mother and I would whitewash the ceiling and the top part of the walls every summer. The bottom part of the walls was painted yellow. The bathtub was cast iron with carved legs. It was wide and comfortable. I took a basin and turned on the water. While the basin was filling with water, I tried to take the bandage off my hand. It was covered in Jorah's vomit. My skin was burning, and I couldn't overcome the pain. I couldn't take the bandage off. The basin was filling. I started to wash my sneakers in it. It got dark. The light in the bathroom went out. "Mom!" I yelled, thinking that my mother hadn't noticed that I was in the bathroom. "Mom!" But there was no answer, and the light didn't come on. I decided to get out of the bathroom myself and turn it on. As soon as my hand reached for the switch, I ran into something cold and hard. I yanked my hand back and started to peer into the darkness. A messy head began to take shape just below my eyes, and the outlines became clearer and clearer. "Sasha, is that you?" I whispered. "Yes, and I told them everything that I showed you," Sasha mumbled. "Sasha, what's wrong with your voice?" I wanted to confirm my suspicion. "They poured it into me." "Sasha, how can we catch them? What should we do?" I asked, realizing that they might not be found. "That's not your concern. You've done everything you could," my friend said in a double voice. "Do you want to say goodbye?" "No, I'm going to live with you. You know that. I told you." I felt that his twisted mouth was smiling. The light came on. "What are you mumbling about in the dark?" my mother yelled from behind the door. I opened the door, slowly walked out of the bathroom, and headed to my room. Walking through my father's room, I saw him lying on the sofa and staring at the television. A strong rage came over me. "Why did you throw Sasha out the window?" I roared and rushed at him with my fists. He grabbed my injured hand, turned me around with my back to him, and threw me to the floor. "You're still talking back to me!" Holding my hand and pressing me to the floor with his knee, he yelled. My mother ran into the room and pushed him away from me. Then he swung and hit her in the face. She flew back to the wall and slid down it. He made a sound like a growl and quickly got up. "You're both pissing me off," my father hissed, leaving the apartment. "Happy now? Come on, I'll change your bandage. I wash after you, I do your laundry, and now I have to bandage your hand too," my mother said discontentedly, rubbing the place where she was hit on her face. I trudged behind her to the kitchen. She sat me down on a chair. "What's on your bandage? Did you spit on it or something?" my mother noticed with disgust. I made up my mind and told her that we had found Sasha. Of course, I didn't tell her how I knew where Sasha was. She sat on the floor. Horror was written on her face. The corners of her lips were turned down. Then she gathered herself and went to Sasha's parents. I was left alone. Even though I didn't feel like eating at all, my head started to hurt badly, and food always helped with headaches. I found some fried potatoes in the frying pan, heated them up, and ate them, not feeling the taste of the food at all. It felt like I was eating paper. The next morning, my mother woke me up. I was happy to find that Sasha hadn't come. Well, maybe he just didn't wake me up. "Let's go to the police. They want to ask you some questions," my mother said. At the station, we were met by the police officer with the kind eyes. He shook my hand and led us to his office with my mother. "We found Sasha's body, but we have a couple of things we need to clear up," the police officer said in a calm tone. "Okay," I mumbled. I didn't like the office. The shabby furniture, the broken lock on the door, and the bars on the windows did not inspire a sense of calm. "When you were approaching the crime scene, did you run into anyone?" "Yes, a woman, with messy hair and a light-colored jacket. She was probably homeless." I lied, but I decided that if the police found her, she would tell them that she had seen the two men. "Okay. If you see her, will you recognize her?" the police officer clarified. "Yes, of course," I answered confidently. Every detail of that day was seared into my memory. From the worst day since I had seen the broken Sasha in my room. My mother and I walked out of the station in silence. She was looking at me meaningfully. She had never looked at me like that before, as if there was care and affection in her eyes. When we got to the house, she ruffled my hair and said, "I have to go to work. Sasha's funeral is tomorrow." I asked for the day off. I went into the hallway. A coffin was standing near the front door of the neighboring apartment. It was small and upholstered in velvet fabric. I tried to slip into the apartment as quickly as possible, and once inside the door, I pressed myself against it and looked through the peephole. But there was nothing in the hallway except the coffin. "Who's there?" I heard a familiar gurgling sound behind me. I closed my eyes and, tilting my head, ran to the kitchen. Standing in the kitchen, I started counting to 10. When I reached 10, I opened my eyes and saw no one. I sighed with relief. In the evening, my whole family was sitting in the kitchen, having dinner. For dinner, my father had brought chicken and even roasted it himself in the oven. He usually did this when he had beaten my mother. "What time is the funeral?" my father asked. "At 9 a.m., my mother replied. "Igor, you're going. He was your friend, after all." "Yes, I'll go," I answered quietly. I wanted to go more so I wouldn't have to stay at home alone. I knew that Sasha would be with me, especially on the day of his own funeral. Then wear your school pants and a white shirt. You don't have anything else decent. Just rags, my mother advised. Okay, I replied, thinking that Sasha wouldn't care what we were wearing. Going to bed in the evening, I squeezed my eyes shut and decided that I wouldn't open them until morning. I didn't sleep. I couldn't because of the fear and the anticipation that Sasha was standing nearby, and the fact that his funeral was tomorrow. Maybe he'll disappear after the funeral, I thought. Sasha didn't come that night either. In the morning, we started to get ready to say goodbye to Sasha. When I walked out of the hallway with my parents, I saw the coffin standing on two stools. Sasha was lying in it. I went closer. He was dressed in a black suit. He even had a tie. His hands were folded on his chest. A box of his treasures was lying at his feet. A funeral march began to play. The musicians were blowing into the brass. I heard Sasha's mother sobbing and wailing. I was afraid to look at his face, but I had to kiss him on the forehead. I saw a shrunken blue face. There wasn't a drop of blood in it. I kissed him and stepped back, bumping my back into Jorah. He walked around me and also went up to the coffin. I didn't notice Schnurr. Where's Schnurr? I was surprised. He couldn't do it. He's afraid to go, Jorah replied dryly. It's his business, I concluded. 4 men came up to the coffin. My father and Sasha's father were in that group of 4. They carried the coffin to the bus, and the musicians went in, having stopped playing the march. Sasha's mother and his grandmother got on the bus. When I saw the grandmother, I wanted to run up and hug her, but I didn't. Her eyes had become almost colorless. Tears had washed away the blueness of her eyes. She was so fragile and pale, just like Sasha in the coffin. She's probably going to die of grief soon too, I thought, looking at the grandmother. The rest of us walked to the cemetery. It wasn't far away. As we walked, I was silent and listened to the conversations of the people around us. They were talking about how the priest had sung the funeral rites for Sasha, about what they would eat, and how they would be fed. I was horrified at how callous and heartless people were. For them, this funeral was not the loss of a child, but an excuse to get together and discuss the news. When we finally reached the cemetery, Sasha's coffin was already being carried to the grave. The grave was decorated with flowers and toys. Sasha had never had so many toys when he was alive. The coffin was lowered into the grave. The mourners looked at the cradle. That's what the coffin looked like in the grave. And one by one, they began to throw dirt onto the lid of the coffin. I didn't make it to say my last goodbye to Sasha at the grave, and I didn't see them close the lid of the coffin. This worried me. Sasha's mother was crying out loud. His father was screaming, "My son, you monsters!" I was surprised by their reaction, because they themselves had beaten Sasha so many times, hadn't given him food, and he would come to me, shuffling his feet in the doorway. I would immediately understand that he was hungry. And now they were grieving parents. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The procession moved back toward our house. A lot of people came to the wake, but everything that happened didn't stick in my memory. I didn't really understand what all these people who didn't really know my friend were saying, and I was very bitter about the whole performance. But I was focused. I was looking to see if there was a silhouette of the grasshopper anywhere, and I didn't see him anywhere all day. Sasha had calmed down. My mother was helping in the kitchen with the other women, and Sasha's mother was sitting in his room, drinking shot after shot. His father was sobbing, telling with a slurring tongue how he used to rock Sasha in his arms as a baby. In the evening, when my mother said that her help was no longer needed, we went home, and my father stayed with Sasha's. They still had almost a whole case of vodka. Maybe he'll kick the bucket, my mother whispered maliciously, looking at my father, who was already slouching sideways in the kitchen chair. Chapter 7. Waking up early in the morning, when my mother had already gone to work, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I could barely feel the pain in my hand. The rays of the morning sun were breaking through the window through the bushes of large yellow flowers, but the room was still in a twilight. I was afraid to look at the corner near the door. I was afraid of seeing Sasha there, but the understanding that I had to get up took over. I sat up on the bed, holding my breath, and looked up at that spot. No one. Phew, thank God, I said. Knock, knock. Someone knocked on the glass of my room's window. I looked out. Schnur was standing outside the window. I opened the window and yelled into it. Hey, what do you want? Come out, we need to talk, Schnur replied. I nodded, quickly put on my denim shorts with Mickey Mouse. They were already short on me, but I didn't have any other shorts. I dove into a striped tank top and ran out to talk to Schnur. I found that my sneakers were clean. My mother had washed them, and I smiled. After lacing up my sneakers, I ran out of the apartment and immediately ran into Sasha's mother. She was standing, leaning against the staircase railing. She was swaying, and I decided to take her arm and walk her to her apartment. When I got to her, I saw that a stream of blood had dried under her nose and her lip was split. Her nose looked fine. Aunt Lyad, let's go home, I said to her gently. She turned her head and smiled, but this smile didn't feel pleasant. It was more like a desire to turn away. Aunt Luda was a thin, petite woman with thick light brown hair. She was a beauty in her youth, my father used to say. I took her by the elbow, and she obediently shuffled toward her apartment. The door was open. I led her inside, and was horrified by the mess that reigned all around. Bottles, glasses, and even forks were lying on the floor throughout the entire apartment. In the room where the wake had taken place, the table was still set for the funeral dinner. Flies were already sitting on it. I didn't linger. Besides, Schnur was waiting for me. I sat Sasha's mother down on the sofa and went back outside. Schnur was waiting for me near the entrance, shifting from foot to foot. What took you so long? He squeaked. Oh, I ran into Sasha's mom and walked her home. What did you want? I rattled off. They caught them. Some homeless woman saw what they did to Sasha, Schnur said, squinting. Who are they? I pretended to be surprised. Just some homeless guys, I think. But I know you told the cops about that homeless woman. How did you see her, and how did you know that Sasha was killed? Schnur said in an even more nasty voice. I don't know. I just remembered that when I was looking for Sasha on the day he disappeared, I didn't go there. So I decided to check that place too. I lied as convincingly as I could. What about in the pool? What did you see there? You were clearly looking at something in horror, Schnur said suspiciously. I just overheated from the heat. Leave me alone. I started to get angry. Okay, I came with good news that they caught those animals, and my grandmother said that they would be gone for a long time. Would be put away for a long time, since they both had already been in prison for killing children, and were released early for good behavior. Good behavior. Funny. A shadow of a smile flickered on Schnur's face. Let's go get cigarettes, I suggested, and we went to the store near the wasteland. As we walked, the sun's rays pleasantly caressed my face. The smell of early summer. I inhaled it with my full chest. For a moment on this walk, I even forgot about those terrible days. Schnur and I began to discuss the Nintendo console his grandmother would give him for his birthday next week. He talked about how awesome it would be, and we could come over to his place every day to play Tank 1990. He even already had a cartridge with that game. Out of all electronic toys, I only played Tetris. I really liked that game, but it was only that one time, when we pooled our earned money with the guys and bought it. But the older guys, who saw us on the bench, engrossed in the game, came up and politely explained that we needed to share, otherwise they would bash our noses into our faces. Well, we shared. Only we never saw our Tetris again. When Schnurr was sharing his plans with me with bated breath, I felt uneasy, because Sasha wouldn't be able to play with us. I remember that day as being so bright and warm. There were not many days like that in my childhood. 5 years passed. It was May. I graduated from the 9th grade, and trade school was ahead. I chose a specialty that, as it seemed to me, was suitable. Gas and electric welder. I had a faint idea of what a person with this profession actually does, but I was fully confident that they would teach me something. I was running and tossing my bag of textbooks in the air. It was the last day of school. The diploma I was given meant the beginning of a new life. I had already run past my house toward the birch grove. It was a little island planted with birches. Wooden houses surrounded it. The place was beautiful, and we would meet there almost every evening to play guitars and to play the game of goats. The abandoned kindergarten with a pool where we used to hang out was renovated, and now there were groups of toddlers there. Accordingly, we couldn't be there anymore. My friends Jorah and Schnurr remained my loyal friends. Once a year, we would go to Sasha's grave. I often remembered him, but he hadn't come to me after his funeral. In 5 years, a lot, you could say, had changed in my life. And not just in my life, but in the country as a whole. My mother studied to become a massage therapist for infants who have problems with muscle tone, and she started making good money. Accordingly, my life became more comfortable. My father, when I was 12 years old, was drunk in the winter and fell near the house, and that's how he froze to death. We found him in the morning. As my mother later said, a dog's death for a dog. We buried him, and life began to get better after that. My mother even began to take better care of the house and herself. As for Sasha's parents, Aunt Luda committed suicide. She hanged herself in her hallway, but that's the official version. And Sasha's father died a year ago from liver cirrhosis. They lived badly. They also drank and fought. So I don't rule out that she didn't hang herself. Their apartment was bought by good-natured old people who were no longer able to run a private farm. They sold their village house and moved into Sasha's apartment. Approaching the birch grove, I began to get worried. My stomach churned, and my breathing quickened. "Will she come? She has to come," was spinning in my head. Next to the big iron swings, which were in the very heart of the grove, stood Lena. She was in the class below me. I had noticed her a couple of years ago, and couldn't have imagined that Lena would even look at me. I was running toward her, and saw her from behind. Her long brown hair was gathered in a high ponytail. A calico white sundress framed her fragile shoulders. She was like a porcelain figurine, just as graceful and very precious to me. I slowed my step, trying not to make a sound, crept up to her, and covered her eyes with my hands. She laughed with a thin, girlish laugh. "Igor, you scared me," she said coquettishly. I was silent. She lowered my hands from her face and turned around. Petite and not tall, she was looking up at me. I wanted to grab her and pick her up. She had incredibly beautiful cat-like eyes, almost cornflower blue. I couldn't force myself to tear my gaze away from her beautiful face. A blush appeared on her cheeks. On her tender, clean skin, it was so noticeable. "Hi," Did you miss me? Have you been waiting long? I came even closer to her and kissed her on the cheek. No, not long, and I didn't miss you. And what about it? Lena chirped and kissed me on the lips. I sat her down on the swings and began to rock her. She was laughing and was so delightful that my heart stood still. I noticed that Lena was looking at me during breaks at the very beginning of my last school year and decided to make a move. One day I caught up with her after school as she was heading home and offered to carry her briefcase. I already had some pocket money, and I treated her to soft-serve ice cream on the way to her house. Later, I invited her to the Birch Grove, where we were gathering with friends to listen to me play the guitar. I had attempts to play Nirvana, but in the end, it turned out to be Lenev. In general, Lena liked it, as she said, and reciprocated my feelings. Even though I'm a SOSO musician. It was already getting dark. Lena said that she had to go home, since she had to help her parents in the garden early in the morning tomorrow. Lena was the daughter of well-off parents by the standards of our town. Her dad was a private business owner. He had 2 pharmacies in town, which was a chain. I often volunteered to help unload goods or write price tags. Her father accepted me well. Lena's mom was a very attractive woman who looked younger than her years. If the phrase that if you want to know what a girl will look like when she gets older, look at her mother, is true, then I was very lucky. I was often at their house. We would watch movies on the VCR together. Her dad often bought new cassettes with American movies or cartoons with Wolodarski's voiceover. And from his voiceovers, I memorized a lot of English phrases. Once her parents went to the garden to spend the night, and we were left alone for the whole night. We sat on the floor, playing manager. We talked for a long time about school and about our mutual friends. But at one point, Lena moved to sit in my lap and started kissing me. I wrapped my arms around her thin waist. I started unbuttoning her buttons and saw her beautifully shaped chest. I looked up and saw Lena's languid gaze. Don't, she's still so small. A thought flashed through my mind. I sighed, moved her to the floor, and started buttoning up her shirt. I couldn't. I was afraid of hurting her. I had already had sex, but with those who didn't cause such tenderness in me as she did. I decided that with Lena, everything would be different and forever. When we were already approaching her house, I pulled Lena close to me and pressed my nose to her hair, inhaling her scent, and closed my eyes. She smelled of cleanliness and a pleasant shampoo aroma. Opening my eyes, I saw the silhouette of the grasshopper behind her. It began to quickly take shape, as if it was coming out of the shadow of the brick fence of the house. I was stunned. Everything inside me began to shake with horror. It was Sasha. He was the same small height, with the same broken arm and terribly crossed bare legs. His head was to the side. His empty eye sockets were staring right at me, and his twisted mouth gurgled. Hello, it's been a long time. I see you're not wasting time. She's not bad. Sasha began to speak in a double voice. How are you here? You were buried. You should be in heaven or somewhere else, I whispered. I'm always here. I've been watching you. After the last time, I had enough for a whole 5 years, Sasha said. Sasha, what do you mean? I didn't understand what he was talking about. I'm not Sasha. He laughed, and blood with bubbles came out of his mouth. Who are you? I killed your friend. I've been living like this for many, many years. Do you remember who killed your Sasha? Homeless people. No, it was me. Those homeless people did everything with my hands. You helped me a lot when they were put in prison. They were killed in prison. And after they died, I fed on them for another 5 years. But they ran out, and I need more, and you'll be next. The grasshopper was next to me. I began to feel him penetrating my body, as if he was putting it on himself. My eyes caught Lena's frightened gaze. I couldn't control my hands. They were on her neck. They started to strangle her. I felt my fingers pressing down on her thin neck. She was trying to push me away, but only a wheeze came out. Lena went limp, but was still breathing. The grasshopper let go of her neck, grabbed her by the waist, and also threw her over my shoulder. Just like 5 years ago, he threw Sasha over the homeless man's shoulder. I ran into the bushes. I felt my legs carrying me, and an incredible hunger was awakening inside me. I ran with Lena to the birch grove, threw her to the ground, and began to tear her calico sundress. I had so much strength in my hands that it was as if I was tearing not fabric, but paper. As soon as I exposed Lena's stomach, I looked at her face. She was motionless, but from her face, I understood that she was frozen in horror. Tears streamed down my face. I understood that I would not be able to forgive myself for that look. Suddenly, the grasshopper penetrated Lena's stomach with my fingers. It was so easy, as if he was tearing cotton candy. I thought I had lost consciousness, but the grasshopper brought me to my senses by pricking me in the heart with something. Waking up, I realized that I was greedily tearing off pieces of a human body that I was holding in my hands with my teeth. I was chewing them and swallowing. I couldn't understand how long this had been going on. But when the grasshopper came out of me, it was getting light. It was no longer Sasha standing and looking at me. Instead of him, it was my beautiful Lena. She had a huge hole in her stomach, from which her intestines and insides were spilling out. She had empty eye sockets. "We'll see each other soon," Lena said in a double voice, and went into the shadow of one of the birches. I was sitting next to the body when I suddenly heard people's voices behind me. I recognized that voice. It was Lena's father's voice. I jumped up and ran on shaky legs somewhere toward the railroad tracks. A swarm of thoughts in my head wouldn't let me stop. How am I supposed to live now? My poor Lena. How could this happen? Why? I don't want to look her parents in the eyes. I won't be able to. I won't be able to live anymore. These thoughts formed one big lump in my head. I was already near the garages next to the railroad. In the distance, I heard a train approaching. This is my chance. A thought flashed through my head. With confident steps, I went up to the railroad track. A lantern standing near the line illuminated me. I looked down and saw that I was completely covered in Lena's blood. My shirt had turned a bright red color. I put my hands in my pockets, and in my pocket was my bloody diploma. I threw it onto the gravel. The bright light of the train blinded me for a moment. I took a breath and took a step right in front of the train. Opening my eyes, I realized that I was sitting on a chair. There was emptiness all around. I couldn't see the walls, the ceiling, or the floor. It was a boundless space in which only a smacking sound could be heard. Looking at the source of the sound, I saw Lena, who was chewing on the little finger of my right hand. She had empty black eye sockets and a pale blue face. I didn't feel anything from her eating me. She also had a huge hole in her stomach. "You'll be enough for me for a couple of years," Lena gurgled and continued. Of course, I understood that this wasn't Lena, but someone who would be devouring me for another couple of years. The end.